Thank you. The Assembly?
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, President. Again, please extend our gratitude to your members.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here today. Next up, we have President Mike Powers, New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association. Welcome, President.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Could you introduce the people joining you?
I'm sorry.
Could you introduce the people joining you today?
I will. To my left is Executive Vice President Tammy Sawchuk.
Welcome.
To my right is the Northern Region Vice President Chris Hansen.
Great. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And in the essence of time and your lengthy agenda here, we'll be quick. Good afternoon, Assemblyman Farrell, Senator Young, and esteemed members of the fiscal committees. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today on behalf of my entire membership regarding the Governor's proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year. My name is Michael Powers, and I have the privilege of serving as President of the New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association, known as NYSCOBA. Among other titles, NYSCOBA represents approximately 20,000 dedicated correctional officers and sergeants who are charged with maintaining the care, custody, and control of our state's prison population, a thankless job that is becoming more dangerous each year. With me today, as I mentioned, so I'll begin by stating the obvious. Since we visited with you a year ago, the correctional system in New York State has faced the greatest challenge in its recent history. Of course, I'm talking about the escape at Clinton Correctional Facility last June. We are all waiting for the Inspector General to complete her investigation, an investigation we trust that will not only reveal the specific facts associated with the escape, but will also address the root causes of such a breakdown in one of the most critical institutions in our society, namely our correctional facilities. When the investigation is complete and we have had the time to thoroughly digest its findings and conclusions, I can assure you that NYSCOBA will clearly, forcefully, and frequently share its recommendations for how New York's correctional system can be improved. NYSCOBA can do this because of the working knowledge its members have of our correctional system. We have shared these recommendations with the administration and with prior administrations, and we will continue to do so until the one goal of every corrections advocate, regardless of political or ideological persuasion, has been achieved. That goal is the dramatic reduction in violence that afflicts inmates and staff alike within the walls of New York's correctional facilities. Some of you may remember our testimony from last year. For the first time, we presented visual displays of the amount of violence that afflicts New York's correctional system. Sadly, I'm duty-bound to share an even more troubling display than we provided last year. According to data gathered by the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, inmate-on-inmate assaults grew by 6% in 2015 and are up 47% from their recent low watermark of 2009. Inmate-on-staff assaults grew by 20% last year and are up more than 70% from the recent low in 2012. There's also an explosion in the amount of contraband in the correctional system, up nearly 24% from just the prior year. Unfortunately, we are not aware of any data on the amount of K2 or other drugs possessed by inmates, but anecdotal evidence in the contraband data suggests that they are rampant in most, if not all, facilities. Let me remind you that this alarming rise in assaults and confiscation of contraband have been occurring while the inmate population has been falling by more than 5%. Let me also repeat that it is our belief that no one supports the more violent system depicted by these graphs. We just do not agree on the root causes of this epidemic or how to reverse it. I would like to clearly and concisely state what the dedicated professionals of NYSCOBA believes. We believe it takes resources to effectively provide care, custody, and control of inmates. This is especially true because of a larger percentage of the inmates inhabiting correctional facilities, nearly 2 out of 3, have been convicted of violent felonies. It is also the case that inmates that were originally assigned to maximum security facilities based on the nature of their conviction have been reshuffled to medium security facilities to address overcrowding at the maximum security prisons. Overcrowding, I should mention, that still exists today. The necessary resources I just mentioned come in the form of a sufficient number of regularly and uniformly trained correction officers outfitted with equipment that enables them to both do their job and return home safely to their family each night. While we are encouraged by the increase in correctional facilities positions that have been filled in the current fiscal year, we have not yet reached a staffing ratio that allows posts critical to the safety of inmates and staff to remain open as their security plan dictates. Meaningful training is not regularly available once a correction officer leaves the academy. All too often, what is provided does not focus on the tools and techniques corrections officers need to provide security to a facility. While we are encouraged by the additional money proposed in this budget for better equipment at Clinton and certain other facilities, in many cases the equipment correction officers rely on is embarrassingly outdated and inadequate. And we are not talking about high-tech devices you may see in the movies. We're talking about basic needs such as flashlights, batons, radios, vehicles, and the like. NYSCOBA has articulated its stance on these critical issues frequently and consistently at hearings like this and through official channels like labor management meetings at both the state and facility levels. All too often, the response has been a polite acknowledgement, but no meaningful follow-through by the department. NYSCOBA hopes that the release of the Inspector General's report will spur meaningful and concerted action to reform a correctional system that had already been in crisis prior to June of 2015, a crisis that no one can now deny. The men and women of NYSCOBA, each of whom walked the toughest beat in law enforcement, as Senator Nozzolio often states, remain committed to such reform. Thank you again for the opportunity to share our views. We'll do our best to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, President Powers. Senator Gallivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. President, thanks for your testimony, the work that you and of course, all of your members do. We all acknowledge that this past year has been a challenging year. I sense some of the frustration in your voice that we share while we all wait for that Inspector General report. I know that you sat through Commissioner Annucci's testimony. There was talk about resources. There was talk about certainly an emphasis on safety and security in facilities. I actually talked with him with the same data that you made reference to in your testimony here, and he acknowledged that, and that something needed to be done. But nonetheless, he outlined some things in his testimony, focusing on technological enhancements, training improvements, and policy changes. The one thing that we did not talk about the proper classification of inmates. And I recognize that, point noted, and I share that concern. But nonetheless, as he talked about the technological enhancements, training improvements, policy changes, he mentioned a number of different things, like expanded use of K-9 units, elimination of metal containers and the such. What other things do you think need to be done that he did not mention to ensure that our facilities are safe and secure for everybody?
Through much of our communication with the department and the administration, much of our concerns are actual posts. While we recognize a rise in our staffing levels, which still has quite a ways to go to balance out and to be effective in the field, what we're lacking are actual posts in our facilities. We have an issue with post closings and actual posts in the facilities and the staff to staff it. That's just one of many things. He mentioned new technology.
Can we stay with the post for a minute? So post closings, I understand. When you say post, do you mean that there are posts that you believe should exist that do not?
Yes. That's correct. And with the post closings, as you're familiar with, create breaches in security in the facility. If I can give you an example real quick here, and for something for you to understand, as you look outside of this hall and you recognize the men's room on the other side of this wall over here, and the angle of which that hall jets and comes down, if the men's room or the hallway down at the end of the hall was an area of recreation and that post was closed and we didn't have a staff member in there, you can see the blind spot from the front of the entrance of this hall. And then as we come down the hall, we don't have security staff there. And that could be a viable post. And sometimes those posts get closed. And that's where the staff comes in to be able to allow us to staff those positions and some of the blind spots in our facilities.
What President Powers is saying is that you could give us 100 new correction officers, but if you close 100 posts, we've gained nothing.
No, I understand about the post closings. What I wanted to understand better was the existence of your belief that additional posts should exist. Now, I'm assuming that, I think I understand correctly, that becomes part of the staffing security analysis that you have the opportunity to weigh in on?
We do. We do. And as Tammy was alluding, we've seen an increase in items, officers, but we're not seeing the posts that are critical in our facilities.
Would you be able to follow up and be more specific for the various facilities? I mean, I don't mean today,
Absolutely.
but like going
Be happy
through the
to share that
facilities.
with anybody, of course.
I mean, the things that you think should exist that don't. There was some discussion with the commissioner about the renaming, restructuring of the Office of Special Investigations. What are your thoughts about that?
I know they had their issues a while back. I believe those issues still exist. We have our own concerns with OSI. We realize that it's new and they may be feeling their way, but that doesn't stop the day-to-day operations that we have. You know, they talk of new plans and implementation, yet they discipline us towards the old style, so to speak. We're coming in, thanks to a lot of our intervention and a lot of our barking, if you will, to the department to implement new changes. And we're starting to see some of that, but we're being treated as if we're the old guard, so to speak. And it's becoming an issue for us. And it's coming through timeliness, through disciplines towards staff, and towards the lack of discipline sometimes to deter criminal activity in our correctional settings.
Is it your opinion, or do you have any thoughts on whether or not the so-called internal affairs, for lack of a better way of saying it, should be run by the department, or should there be separate outside oversight, as some have proposed? If you have thoughts.
We provide care, custody, and control. You know, we're charged with providing that. We have our issues. We share them with the department, and in the interim, until we either get the fair shake that we just rightly deserve, then we'll decide whether or not we proceed forward with any of our concerns.
Fair enough. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone on the Assembly side? Senator Nozzolio.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. President Powers, always good to see you. Thank you for the work that your members do each and every day to keep us safe.
Thank you.
That's not said enough. I appreciate you quoting me, and I hope those words live forever. The fact is, you do walk the toughest law enforcement beat in America. Your members are put in harm's way each and every day, each and every hour of every day, with nothing much to protect them other than their wits and your abilities. There's $47 million of capital money in the state budget proposal by Governor Cuomo to reflect the settlement with the special housing, the SHU settlement, the special housing. That NYSCOBA and I worked very closely when I had Senator Gallivan's responsibilities, and closely on the issue of establishing different special housing for those mentally ill inmates. And I must say, NYSCOBA was terrific in ensuring the seamless transition of that very major program in our state correctional facilities. It wasn't easy. but major expenditures done at Auburn, done at even 5 Points, that didn't have that type of facility constructed. Tell us what types of anticipated concerns or protocols, procedures, safety issues that you see in the development of this new settlement. And just to preface that question with the statement that I understand what special housing has been. It's been to, in many cases, certainly in some cases to discipline, but in many cases to ensure the protection of the inmate. So an inmate who may have needed special housing. But tell me what this new settlement looks to develop.
Well, thank you for the acknowledgement. We consider ourselves the best in the nation in this line of law enforcement. And it's a good question, and I'm glad you asked, because quite frankly, you're the only one that's asked us. And with that being said, minus the mental health aspect, and the commissioner mentioned, I believe, 18%. I believe you mentioned 18% of the population has mental health issues, and the NICLU settlement addresses that quite well. But from a disciplinary standpoint, when you take out the mental health issue, from a disciplinary standpoint and an operational standpoint in the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision to keep the facilities operating in a timely fashion, this new settlement doesn't have a deterrent to criminal activity. And there's plenty of criminal activity inside the walls and fences of our correctional facilities. And I'm not to say that a majority of them go to program, they're looking for the rehabilitation process, but we have a small factor. And that factor that comes into play, that acts out criminally, doesn't have the deterrent anymore after a short shoe sentence or a longer one to come back out and modify his behavior or her behavior from that aspect. I believe Tammy could speak a bit on it as well, as she's a supervisor in a SHU for many years, and we have our concerns with it, but we implement it. We'll roll it out because we are the best at what we do, and we'll work with it. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, in 2014, the interim stipulation settlement that was agreed to in the NICLU case didn't significantly drop the numbers of acts of violence in our facilities. And with the reintroduction of heroin and the introduction of K2 and the epidemic of K2, that even the commissioner acknowledges, has created a very violent workplace, and it's created a mode of behavior that doesn't have a deterrent to bad behavior.
Do you think that this proposal, are you suggesting, will basically eliminate, significantly reduce, at best, the deterrent factor in terms of inmate discipline?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
This settlement, this proposal to construct additional SH, or to retrofit the housing, do you believe it takes away the deterrent tool of that exists today for deterrence
Yes.
with special housing?
Yes.
So that, how, to those who haven't worked in our correctional facilities, what does that mean?
If there's a criminal act that takes place in the correctional setting, I'll give you an example. If we suspect somebody of using a narcotic inside the facility, and we test them for that narcotic, there's usually there could be a confinement. They could be confined from their programs, confined from recreation, confined from certain privileges that they get. Not necessarily visitation, or anything family related. They still have correspondence and everything with that, but from a privilege inside the facility, they could lose that. That's being modified significantly at this point with this settlement, and that is not. We'll continue to see the action. If an individual didn't submit to the urine sample, in the urinalysis, then the penalty's not there anymore. So, is there a deterrent for drug use? No.
Very difficult situation going to be made worse.
Makes it very extremely difficult for our frontline staff.
My time is long since up. Thank you very, very much for your work and your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Thank you,
service to the
Senator.
people of the state of New York.
And
Best wishes.
thank you, President Powers, and all of you for what you do for us on behalf of the people of New York State to keep us safe every single day. We appreciate you very much. So thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is President Patrick J. Lynch, New York City Patrolmen's Benevolent Association. Welcome, President Lynch. It's great to see you again. So happy you can join us. I'm sorry this is a marathon, not a sprint today, but we're getting there. Could you please introduce the gentleman at the table with you?
Sure. To my left is Mubarak Abdul-Jabbar. He's our second vice president in the PBA, and our counsel, Michael Murray.
Thank you very much.
And also the people that do the work, actually, behind me is John Nutholt and Valerie DeBoss in the
Great. Welcome to each and every one of you, and we look forward to your testimony today.
Thanks very much. Good evening, Senators and Assembly members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. In the interest of time, I will summarize the written remarks I've submitted onto the record, and I know it's been a long day of testimony for all of you. As many of you may know, New York City police officers have made extraordinary gains in restoring our city's public safety over the past 25 years. This renaissance has been tremendously important to New York City's economic vitality, to its financial health, and by extension, to the health of New York State as a whole. Unfortunately, we're not currently receiving the support we need to maintain these public safety gains. To help remedy this situation, we respectfully request your support for the following initiatives in the budget process and also in the legislative session. One priority is the 3-year extension of the Taylor Law's interest arbitration provision, which is included in the governor's executive budget. As you may know, the Taylor Law's impasse resolution process represents New York City police officers' only recourse in the face of the city's long-standing refusal to pay us at a rate even approaching our local and national counterparts. Our salaries have fallen 30% or more behind our counterparts in comparable local jurisdictions, largely due to the one-sided bargaining environment and skewed impasse resolution process that we faced throughout the 1990s. This legislature's attempt to help close that gap when it granted the PBA the right to resolve impasse under Taylor Law in 1998. Nearly 2 decades later, however, we remain in virtually the same uncompetitive position as we were under the previous administration's regime for several reasons. One glaring issue is the complete lack of codified ethical standards for neutral arbitrators. Given the current scrutiny on public officials and police officers at all levels of government, it is especially important for taxpayers and public employees to be able to trust that the arbitration process is unbiased. We are therefore seeking legislation to establish a code of conduct for arbitrators in Taylor Law proceedings, modeled on the ethical codes already in widespread use in other private and public sector arbitrations. The second item of concern, our current lack of training and equipment necessary to counter the type of active shooter-style and terrorist attack we've recently witnessed, unfortunately, in Paris, San Bernardino, and other places. Law enforcement best practices now dictate that the first police officer on the scene of an active shooter incident, usually a police officer on routine patrol, must immediately engage the attacker to minimize any further casualties. According to a report by the Public Executive Research Forum, PERF, 1/3 of police officers who attempt to stop an active shooter alone are shot by that attacker. New York City police officers on patrol are currently equipped with only 9mm handgun and basic ballistic restraint vests that provide no protection from high-powered rifle rounds. In this respect, the NYPD lags behind many other law enforcement agencies nationwide, which already train and equip their patrol officers with long guns, ballistic helmets, and enhanced body armor. The governor has also requested funding for similar equipment and training for all New York State troopers in his executive budget. We believe that the police officers who patrol our nation's top terror target must be similarly trained and equipped. We'll be therefore asking and seeking legislation that will provide a mandate for the NYPD to equip every New York City police officer with an anti-terrorism response kit of the type I've just outlined and provide training in advanced counterterrorism tactics. The third item of concern, our city and our state's moral obligation to provide for police officers who are disabled in the line of duty. That obligation is not being met for New York City police officers hired after July 1st, 2009 under the Tier 3 pension plan. Although they face the same dangers as their more senior colleagues, they are subject to a reduced accident disability benefit that would not allow them to feed or care for their families if they are disabled on the job. They are the only police officers in the state who face this unjust situation. Simply put, it is not in the public interest or police officers to ask themselves whether they can risk their family's financial future by going into harm's way. We are therefore calling upon the legislature to establish a statewide minimum standard for police officers' accident disability benefits that will equalize those benefits for New York City police officers in Tier 3. The issues I've just outlined represent our members' top concerns heading into the budget cycle. But there are many other issues that we'll want to address as the legislative session moves forward. I thank you once again for your time and your consideration of my testimony. A longer version has been submitted. I appreciate the opportunity to testify here today.
I just want to check. Senator Gallagher, no? Senator Diane Savino.
Thank you, Senator Kruger. Good afternoon,
Senator.
President Lynch. As you know, I was the sponsor of the bill that was unfortunately vetoed by Governor Patterson in 2009, I think it is now. Last year, we attempted to resolve the situation, but we ran into a roadblock with the City Council of the City of New York, who decided that they couldn't provide us a home rule message. Are we making any progress with the council with respect to that?
No, we've made no progress whatsoever with both sides of City Hall, whether the City Council or the Mayor's office as well.
So they still remain obstinate about this issue?
Absolutely, every step of the way.
And since the veto of the Tier 2 extender, can you tell me how many New York City police and firefighters are currently affected by that veto?
We have, just in the NYPD, we have upwards of 10,000 younger New York City police officers on patrol who are covered under Tier 3.
How many of them have been injured on the job since then?
That exact number I can get you, but as we go through that number, just the risk itself has an effect on every police officer. If you have a more senior police officer like myself in a radio car who's covered by Tier 3, and my partner sitting next to me is Tier 3, it's unfair that we both go into the same job, face the same risk. But unfortunately, if we're disabled together, I'll be able to take care of my family on into the future, but my partner won't be able to do that under Tier 3.
I really would be interested in finding out what the number of officers that have been injured that are now facing this, financial burden. You don't have to give it to me today, but it will be helpful in us pushing this, what is really an unfair situation.
Looking forward to get you that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Evening. Assembly.
Thank you, Senator. We will hear from Assemblymember O'Donnell.
Thank you for staying around.
Good evening, thanks.
You sound like a true New Yorker, may I say, and you spoke very quickly, so I wanted to just ask you one quick question.
Sure.
You said in the beginning that you are compensated at less of a level than comparable other officers, and so I'm curious to know what you meant by comparable. Do you mean compared to Boston and Philadelphia? Do you mean compared to Westchester and Nassau? What did you mean?
Actually, both.
Okay.
When you compare us across the country, both locally and nationally, we're 30% behind all
So
those
you're 30% behind what they pay in Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia and Boston?
The exact numbers I can get you, but when you average it nationally across the country as well as locally, we're 30% behind, absolutely.
But there's nothing really we do about that, right? That's a negotiation between you folks in the city of New York and whoever the mayor and city council happen to be at the time, right?
What's important, though, in what we're asking is that there be a code within the arbitration process. First, that we...
well, I understood you very clearly. I'm just trying to get to the money part. The money part is there's nothing here in the state capitol that can really be done to address the money part. It's your own negotiation with the collective bargaining agreement with the city of New York, correct?
Right, and what we can do is encourage the city to reasonably negotiate, which they haven't. They rely on a negotiation that says pattern bargaining, one size fits all. And as we know, whether it's a pair of gloves or it's negotiation, one side never fits all. So what you should do at the bargaining table is negotiate to solve problems on both sides.
Right.
Pattern bargaining doesn't do that. So our only recourse is to go to the Taylor law, to go to arbitration in that process. So first we'll need to make sure that law gets re-signed, and then we want to add some fairness and ethics into that process as well.
I didn't mean for you to slow down. I heard you the first time. You can speak as quickly as you want. I just want to say that I have extraordinarily good working relationships with the 2-4 and 2-6 in my district, and I thank you for being here and for your service.
And thank you for being a voice for us.